craziest statistic that I just read when coming up to this panel was that there is 37% of pastors in America hold to a biblical worldview. It's crazy, 37%. So we're in a room full of pastors. My question is to you is, and we'll start with you, Lucas, because I know you wrote a book about this, Addressing Woke Pastors. I kind of want to hear what you think as far as how can these pastors in this room, when they go back home and they're in their networks with their other pastors and in the community with other pastors, how do they address this? How do they confront this with these other pastors?
Yeah, no, so good. And, Barna has been responsible for a lot of that research, and not the Barna Group, but George Barna at Arizona Christian Cultural Research Center. And his, just a plug, if you're looking for a resource for the millennial generation, I worked on a project with there's about 12 of us on that with George called Helping Millennials Thrive. And it is a great resource for this issue of worldview that I'd highly recommend for pastors to get a hold of. When you look at this, I think that it really starts at the seminaries in a lot of cases, because you have people that go to the seminaries, to become a pastor. They're going to Bible college or Christian university, and they're expecting that to be the safe place. They're going there because it's not the secular university, that they don't think they're going to have all the things. But oftentimes they find themselves, sort of hijacked or side railed by this progressive ideology from professors. And so, I've done a lot of work on this in some of my writing, where there has been this dark money that's passed into Christian universities, in the same way that you had the Harvards and the Yales and the Notre Dames, and even like a University of Michigan that used to be very pro-clergy. These institutions that were raising up, they were specifically started to, train up the best pastors in America. Over time, they embrace progressive ideology, and now you can't even get Harvard to mention its Christian roots on the historical tour at Harvard, which I've done. And so now we're starting to see that, though, with some of the second generation schools. And I'll probably offend somebody by this, but the Wheatons and the Biolas, they're still great people at these schools. There's still great professors that are there. But there's infiltration happening, the Azusa Pacifics and these things where, it depends on who you get for that class, on how safe it's going to be. And so when you have progressive professors that are then training progressive pastors, now all of a sudden they go back to these pulpits and they're starting to shape progressive parishioners, and we're starting to see that worldview shift in America. And I think that's a major thing. That's not the only thing, but a major part that's responsible for it.
I came up through a Doctor of Philosophy program, so I've never been to seminary. I don't have, a sense of how that all works. But I think a lot of pastors just don't know what to do. 95% of pastors, and this is going back to some of George Barna's research, say they believe the Bible speaks to today's issues. Well, then he pulled one over on them and handed them a list. Which of these issues have you ever addressed from the pulpit? Only 9% of it had ever said anything, because they don't know how to address the issues except from maybe a politicized point of view. So from the perspective of counterfeit worldviews, anything Christians do is political. Okay, there's no way. If you speak to abortion, you're being political. If you speak to sexuality, you're being political, right? Because to a leftist, everything is political. So what do? And a lot of pastors, they come back from events like this and say, well, I'm just going to address all the issues at one time. And everybody's walking out. What happened to that guy? Why? You got so cranky all of a sudden. But there is a way to do it, and that is to address what the Bible says about something and then compare it to the counterfeit worldviews. So, for instance, on the question of how could God be good when there's so much evil in the world? Every person in your church is asking that question. Every single kid I work with, that's one of their top 5 questions they ask. But what nobody ever does is say, okay, so how do other worldviews handle that? A secular worldview says, well, it doesn't matter. DNA, as Richard Dawkins said, DNA just is. It doesn't know, it doesn't care about you, it just is. And we dance to its music. So then you start to ask, well, what does the new spiritualist worldview say? That evil doesn't actually exist. Okay, what does a Marxist worldview say? Evil exists because those in power oppress us. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, There's only one worldview left standing that makes any sense of the world at all, and that is a biblical worldview.
That's really good. I want to piggyback on that. I love my church. I also live in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Kenosha, Wisconsin is where Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 people. You guys remember the Cryon, the mostly fiery but peaceful protest? 3 blocks from my house, all right? 3 blocks from my house. And we are right in the middle of it. And so you would think that means that we had a lot to talk about at my church. And I will say, love my church. You know how many times we talked about it? 0. We never discussed BLM, systemic racism, whiteness. Is it okay to self-defense? Is self-defense okay or not okay? And the list goes on of the things we've never talked about because my church leaders, who I love, are so committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ that they are absolutely convinced that we don't need to talk about anything else. And I keep saying, I meet pastors like this all the time, and I just say, you are never going to convince your people that just stop worrying about abortion. Stop worrying about BLM. Stop worrying about DEI class. Stop worrying about drag queens coming into the kids' schools and teaching them about transgender. It doesn't fine. They'll hear the gospel at church. Who cares if they learn there's 32 genders? Who cares if a dude comes into your daughter's dressing room? Who cares if fill in the blank? You're never going to convince people, and I would argue you shouldn't convince them that these things don't matter because they are reshaping and restructuring the world they live in. So the question has to come down to, are your people going to hear it from you, or are they going to hear it from Madonna or Britney Spears or whoever young people listen to today? Because I don't even know, because I listen to cool music. I don't even know who sings WAP. There you go. Are they going to hear it from these people, or are they going to hear it from you, their pastor?